So the next subject to look into is cameras. And cameras are important as they define the viewpoint through which a rendering is done. For example, I got a very simple scene here, one object, two cameras and a light source. And if I press F12 to do a render, you can see that the image generated is from this viewpoint of this camera. This is currently the active camera. It's the camera called close-up. There's actually another camera in this scene called overview. And if we make that the active camera and press render again, then you can see that we get the other viewpoint as output of the render. So a scene has at most one active camera. And this is a different thing than an active object. So active object has to do with object selection. Active camera has to do with the rendering viewpoint. Apart from using this drop down on the scene properties tab, you can change the active camera by selecting the camera that you want to make active. Go to View, Cameras, and Set Active Object as Camera. If we pick that option, you see that you get into the camera view mode. So this is the view from the camera, which matches the rendering. So I can press render again, and you can see that it's the same view. Note that even though you can zoom in and zoom out, just like the normal 3D view, the camera view, what is rendered is exactly the same. It's just that the way you see this camera view is different. If we switch the active camera to overview, you see that we're still within the view camera mode, and we get the viewpoint from this camera. A third and quick way to switch the active camera is to use the outliner. You can see this green icon next to the camera name. If you click that, you can see that the gray outlined camera is the active camera. To make changes to what the camera sees, you can use the normal object transformation options. So for example, if we've got this overview camera selected, we can use the normal shortcut keys, so G to grab it and move it somewhere else, or rotate. And when you press C twice, you rotate around the view axis. And in this way, you can change what the camera sees and what its orientation is. We'll switch back to the camera view using the backtick menu in this case. So this is a view pie menu, and then pick view camera, you get back to the camera view. Within the camera view mode, you can also use the normal transformation shortcuts, but they work slightly different. For example, if I press G in this mode and then move around, you can see that the camera moves perpendicular to the view direction. And while this mode is active, if I press the middle mouse button, now if I move the mouse up and down, you can see that the camera moves forward and backward. In the camera view mode, if I press the R for rotation, by default it rotates around the view axis. But once again, when it's active in this mode and I press the middle mouse button, what actually happens is that the camera rotates around its position. So you can look around basically. Another way to influence the camera orientation and position is to use the numeric values for object transformation. For example, we can set this rotation in the Y direction to 0, which clears the rotation around the view axis for this camera. And a very nice way to position a camera is the so-called fly mode, which we activate with Shift backtick. And when we do that, you can see that the cursor changes into this crosshair. And if we move the mouse, then you can see you look around from the current position. And then just as in a game, you've got the WASD keys to move forward in the direction that you're viewing, backward, left, right, etc. And to move up and down, we can use the Q and the E keys. And in this way, you can have very nice and controlled camera transformations. So the fly mode actually also works in the normal 3D view. So when we switch away from the camera view and then activate fly mode with Shift backtick, we get the same interface. So you get the crosshairs, you can move around, etc. If you'd like to fly a bit faster, you can hold the Shift key while moving and it will increase the fly speed. And when you're done, you left click in order to confirm the position, and from then on it's fixed. So when you're working with objects and setting up your scene and setting up cameras, it helps to have different viewpoints of the whole scene. And we already saw a few of them when we opened the view menu with the backtick. So apart from the view camera view, there's also a top view, for example, which gives you an overview of the scene from above, or from the left, from the front, etc. One nice option here is if you select a number of objects and you'd like to zoom in onto the selected objects, you pick the few selected ones. One thing to note about these view modes is that this is an orthographic view, which means that all view directions are parallel. So there's no perspective here. For example, if we duplicate only the bunny, then you can see if we move it backwards, so we'll move it in the Y direction, then do the front view again, you can see that the bunny that's behind has the same height as the bunny that's in the front, which is different than if we switch to the normal 3D view and then take more or less the same view. You can see that the bunny is smaller in this view. So this is a perspective view, while the front view is an orthographic view. And sometimes you'd like to have more than one of these orthographic views, and this is where the quad view comes in. You can activate this with Ctrl-Alt-Q, and this will divide the view into 4 views, where 3 of the views are the top, the front, and the right view. Let's hide this menu. And then this view we can change into whatever we want. For example, we can have the normal perspective 3D view or change this into a top view. While the other 3 can only be changed in terms of zoom and in terms of translation, but they'll stay the same, so top, front, and right, while this one is configurable. And in this way we can position, for example, very easily this bunny close to there, pick the camera, while we still have the camera view also active, and then move the camera to the position that we'd like to, for example, to show both of these bunnies. To get out of this quad view, you press Ctrl-Alt-Q again.